haunting. It did not begin with violence. That is what unsettles me the most when I think back on it. The house never announced its intentions with crashing doors or shattering glass. It was subtle, patient, almost polite in its approach, like something that had all the time in the world to unravel me. When I first stepped into the house, I noticed the air. It smelled wrong, not mold, not dust, not the typical decay of an old building. It was colder, sharper, almost metallic, the way blood smells when it dries on iron. I tried to ignore it, convincing myself it was simply the lingering staleness of a place long abandoned. But the smell never faded. If anything, it grew stronger the longer I stayed, until it became part of the house itself, as inseparable as the beams and plaster. The floors creaked constantly, even when no weight pressed on them. The sound was irregular, not the simple groan of settling wood. It was paced, deliberate, as though footsteps dragged themselves down the hallway just outside of view. At night, when I lay awake staring at the cracked ceiling, I could hear them move across the upstairs rooms, shifting slowly from one corner to another. I would remind myself that I was alone, that no one lived there but me. But the sound persisted, threading itself into my bones until silence itself seemed impossible. The walls had a strange quality to them. In daylight, they seemed ordinary, peeling wallpaper, water stains bleeding down like veins. But at dusk, the surface changed. The shadows that gathered there did not disperse evenly. They clung in patches, darker than the rest, like bruises on pale skin. Sometimes I thought I could see the faintest movements inside them, as though something on the other side pressed lightly against the thin barrier, testing its strength. It was the mirrors that convinced me the house was alive. There were only two, one in the bathroom upstairs and another in the hall. They reflected nothing wrong at first glance, but if I stared long enough, something always shifted. My reflection's eyes lingered a fraction too long before blinking. Its lips twitched faintly into shapes I didn't make. Once I caught it smiling, not wide, not grotesque, but enough to show teeth when my own mouth was still. After that, I avoided mirrors, though I could feel them waiting, their glassy surfaces buzzing faintly in the corners of my sight. The cold came next, not a gradual chill, but sudden drops that left the air heavy with frost. I would walk from one room to another and feel the temperature plummet, breath misting in front of me while the rest of the house remained warm. These cold spots shifted daily, moving from the stairwell to the kitchen, from the living room to the foot of my bed. The longer I stayed inside them, the more my body tensed, skin prickling as though invisible fingers grazed lightly across it. The nights blurred. Sleep became impossible. I lay there with my eyes open, heart racing, as the sound of breathing filled the room. It was never steady, sometimes shallow, sometimes ragged, sometimes long and drawn out, as though whatever made it had lungs filled with water. It always came from the corner where the shadows were thickest. No matter how many times I checked, there was nothing to see. Only the sound waiting patient. The house grew bolder. I began to notice objects moved. Small things at first, a book shifting from one table to another, a candle turning itself sideways. Then larger things, chairs dragged a few inches across the floor, doors left ajar that I had locked. I would hear the faint scrape of wood across wood while I sat frozen in another room, unable to move, listening as the house rearranged itself with quiet intention. The smell intensified, no longer faint, no longer metallic alone. It thickened into something wetter, heavier, like soil soaked with decay. It clung to the walls, seeped from the floorboards, filled my throat until every breath tasted of rot. Sometimes it carried another note, sulfur, acrid, sharp enough to sting the nose. It was as though the house exhaled, and I was forced to breathe it in. I began to feel watched, not just in one place, not just in the corners, but everywhere. The weight of unseen eyes pressed constantly into my back, my neck, my skin. Even in daylight, when the sun cut harshly across the rooms, the sensation never lifted. My body knew what my mind refused to accept. I was not alone. The first touch happened weeks in. I was lying in bed, the air cold enough to sting my lungs, when something pressed against my hand. It was soft, almost gentle, like the brush of a fingertip across my skin. I tried not to move, convinced I was imagining it. But then it tightened, fingers curling, holding mine with deliberate weight. The touch was wrong. It was too cold, too dry, too firm. I yanked my hand back, and the bed shifted as though someone had been lying beside me all along. After that, the house claimed me. Every sound, every shadow, every breath became a thread in its web. The mirrors no longer waited for me to look. They reflected movements when I passed, figures standing behind me that vanished when I turned. The footsteps grew heavier, louder, shaking dust loose from the ceiling beams. Doors slammed in rooms I hadn't entered, and sometimes I woke to find every window open, the curtains thrashing violently though the air outside was still. The whispers came last. Faint at first, like wind through cracks, then sharper, closer, shaping themselves into almost words I couldn't quite catch. They rose at night, circling my bed, moving around me as though pacing. The sound filled my head, pressing into my skull, until my own thoughts drowned beneath it. I tried to leave. The first time, the front door wouldn't open. The handle turned, the lock slid, but the door held as though fused to the frame. I threw my weight against it until my shoulder ached, but it never moved. The windows resisted too, their frames sealed by something thicker than paint. The house would not let me go. I don't know how long I've been here anymore. The days bleed into one another. Light comes and goes, but the weight of the house never changes. The marks have begun to appear on my skin now, bruises in the shape of fingers, scratches that trace symbols across my arms while I sleep. The whispers grow clearer with each night, pressing closer, no longer content to remain in the corners. The haunting is not outside of me anymore. It is inside, sinking through my flesh, stitching itself into my bones. I carry the house wherever I go, even when I close my eyes, even when I try to forget. I know now that I was never the intruder here. The house chose me long before I crossed its threshold. It waited, patient, polite, certain. And now it no longer waits. It lives in me. Possessing. It began with whispers, but whispers are easy to ignore. The mind can dismiss them as tricks of exhaustion, as the settling groans of wood, as breath caught in the throat of the house. What cannot be ignored is when the whispers take root, when they move past the ears and begin to coil inside your skull, curling tighter and tighter until they no longer sound like voices around you, but thoughts that were never yours. That is what happened to me. The night I first felt the shift, the air in my room was heavier than usual. The smell of copper was thick, metallic, and raw, like coins held too long in the palm. The candle beside my bed trembled with every draft though no window was open, its flame long and unsteady, spitting faint threads of smoke that crawled up the wall. The house felt awake, not alive in the way that animals are alive, but aware, its silence deliberate, its stillness waiting. When I closed my eyes, I thought of nothing, but thought no longer belonged to me. Images bloomed uninvited in my mind, blurred at first, then sharper, etched into the darkness with unnatural clarity. A face I didn't know, twisted in anguish. Fingers smeared black with soil, dragging themselves across stone. A mouth stretched open, but no sound emerged, only the shudder of breath that echoed through my chest. I forced my eyes open, breath shallow, yet the images did not stop. They continued behind the glass of sight, playing out as though painted into the air itself. Shapes moved at the edges of vision, not shadows, not light, but something heavier, pressing against the fabric of the room. I knew they were not mine, these thoughts, these visions, but they came from somewhere inside me all the same. I told myself I still had control. That was the last lie I allowed myself. The first mark appeared the next morning. Not on the walls this time, not carved into wood or glass, but into flesh. My skin bore it in bruised lines, faint at first, a shape that resembled no letter I knew. The bruise darkened as the hours passed, growing deeper, as though ink was bleeding up from beneath the surface. The ache was constant, a pulse that throbbed in rhythm with my heart. I tried to scrub it away, clawed at it until the skin grew raw, but nothing lifted. The mark only sank deeper. When I looked in the mirror that night, the bruise wasn't alone anymore. My reflection carried more than my skin did. Traces of black curling across my arms, faint symbols coiling up my throat. My reflection smiled faintly. My lips did not. I began to lose time. Minutes first, then hours. I would find myself standing in rooms I didn't remember walking into. The book in my hands, though I had left it locked in a drawer. Pages filled with handwriting I did not recognize, yet written in my hand. Long strings of symbols bleeding into one another, etched in deep black strokes that looked more like wounds than words. The whispers grew bolder. They no longer hovered in the air but spoke through my own thoughts, blending into them until I couldn't tell the difference. Sometimes I heard them as commands. Other times they used the echo of my own voice, instructing, urging, demanding. The worst was when I heard laughter, low, hollow, dragging against the walls of my mind like chains pulled across stone. Sleep abandoned me. In its place came episodes where my body betrayed me. I would lie still, eyes open, unable to move while the air pressed thick against my chest. I would feel the bed dip beside me, weight sinking into the mattress as though someone lay down. Breath moved across my ear, cold and damp. And then my body would move without me, an arm lifting, fingers twitching, my head turning toward the darkest corner of the room. My will had no say in it. I was a passenger in my own skin. Food lost its taste. Water turned bitter. Every swallow burned faintly as though something foreign lingered in my throat. My body weakened, but my reflection did not. In the mirror, my form stood taller, sharper, eyes darker than they should be. It was feeding, I realized. Feeding through me, using me as its shell. I tried to resist. I lit candles in every room, their wax pooling thick across the floorboards. I scrawled crude symbols in salt along the thresholds, desperate barriers to something I no longer understood. But the candles bent, flames stretching inward toward me like fingers reaching for flesh. The salt blackened overnight, curling in on itself like it had burned from the inside out. Nothing held it back. Nothing stopped its reach. The smell worsened. Copper at first, then sulfur, then something else entirely. A stench of rot and earth turned inside out, thick enough to choke. It clung to my skin, soaked into my clothes, filled every breath until it seemed I was rotting with it. The possession was not sudden. It was a slow drowning, each moment a little more of me slipping beneath the surface. My voice began to change. Not always, not completely, but sometimes when I spoke aloud, I would hear the echo lower and wetter, as though another throat layered beneath mine had shaped the words. My reflection's mouth often moved before mine did. The nights became unbearable. I felt my body rise while I remained behind, watching through eyes that did not belong to me. I would walk the house, dragging fingers along the walls, leaving streaks of blackened ash that pulsed faintly like veins. I scrawled things on the floorboards, symbols I could not later recognize, yet they writhed at the corner of my sight when I tried to scrub them away. I stopped leaving the house, not because I feared what others would see, but because I feared what I would do. The last time I stepped outside, I felt my body stiffen, my head snapping toward a passerby. My hand clenched until nails pierced flesh. My vision darkened at the edges, and all I could think was how easily bones might break if pressed hard enough. When the black fog cleared, I stood frozen, blood in my palm where my nails had cut deep. The passerby was gone. I never dared leave again. Now the line between myself and it is blurred. The whispers no longer feel foreign. They rise in rhythm with my heartbeat, their tones layered into my thoughts until I cannot separate where I end and it begins. The bruises have become carvings deep and black, spreading across my body in symmetrical lines that move when I breathe. Sometimes at night, they glow faintly, the room filling with the acrid stench of sulfur as the air hums with low vibration. I am not alone inside myself. I do not think I ever was. It was waiting patient, buried deep in the book, in the house, in the silence. All it needed was for someone to open the door wide enough. Possession is not a sudden act. It is not a violent storm that rips through a body all at once. It is erosion. It is a slow, patient binding that strips away the pieces of a person until only the shell remains, pliable, waiting. I am nearly hollow now. When I look into the mirror, it no longer bothers with the pretense of mimicking me. It smiles openly, teeth sharp and endless, eyes too black to reflect light. It does not blink when I do. It does not move when I move. It only waits, grinning faintly, as if savoring the final moments before it no longer has to hide. I know the truth now. I am not haunted. I am being worn. And soon, when the last pieces of me have been scraped away, when my will is nothing but dust, it will not be me standing here anymore. It will wear my skin, carry my voice, move my bones. No one will know the difference. The possession will be complete, and I will be gone.